we Europeans are responsible for these atrocities in Gaza. And my question to my friends, especially in Germany, who object to the use of the term genocide for what's happening in Rafah as we speak, is this. For how long are you going to permit your guilt over the Holocaust to justify, to legitimize, and to weaponize the genocide of the Palestinian people? How many rivers of Palestinian blood need to flow before you feel cleansed of your guilt over the Holocaust? We have to stop sitting on the fence, because that makes us complicit in a crime against humanity. The Israeli right has managed to hide behind the specter of the Holocaust with immense efficiency to co-opt social democrats, liberals, progressives, anti-fascists in a manner that their own fascism, the fascism of the Zionist right, of the Netanyahus, of Likud, they've succeeded in effectively gaining immunity. In Germany today, you can only talk about genocide if you support it. Israeli ministers are completely free to talk about a greater Israel from the river to the sea. That's genocide of the Palestinians. But if you oppose the genocide, you cannot talk about it. And that is all done under the cloak of identifying anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. Once upon a time, that would not have been possible. Once upon a time, Willy Brandt, the Social Democrat chancellor in Germany, or Bruno Kreisky, the equivalent in Austria, talked very sensibly about the need, on the one hand, to support the Jews' right to live in peace and without fear of anti-Semitism in a manner that is balanced out by Palestinian rights. Today, that is simply not possible. Our leaders in the West have to understand that they cannot be liberal, they cannot be democratic if they support the idea of an exclusively Jewish state. What would they say if I were to support an exclusively Greek Orthodox Greece? I think that I would be immediately denounced as anti-European, anti-liberal, anti-democratic, a xenophobe. Bear that in mind. For centuries, we Europeans, not just the Germans or the British, we have collectively persecuted the Jewish people. We have effected one pogrom after the next. And then at some point, we, the powers that be in Europe, decided that this is the time to farm out the Jews to a land which is declared empty, along with the Zionist ideology. Zionism started with a slogan, a land without a people, for a people without a land. That harks back to white settlement. When the British disembarked in today's New South Wales in Australia, they declared Australia to be terra nullius, an empty land. By assumption, the Aborigines, the natives, were not humans. And then they proceeded towards their genocide to take over the land. The Zionist slogan, a land without a people, is again the first step towards the dehumanization of natives and essentially a proclamation of a genocide. We Europeans need to take responsibility for what is happening across the land of Palestine, from the river to the sea. I don't care about what kind of state solution we have. Universal human rights from the river to the sea, for the Jews, for the Palestinians, for the Bedouins, for everyone. The manner in which the Western media have been presenting in juxtaposition the war in Palestine, the massacre in Palestine, because there isn't even a war, this is just straightforward massacre, with the war in Ukraine. It is as if they wanted to put on display their toxic cynicism and hypocrisy. When a hospital is bombed in Mariupol, which we should condemn, that is a crime against humanity. When Putin switches off the electricity supply in Ukraine, it is a crime against humanity.
Are we really going to sit by watching these appalling war crimes being committed? Are we going to watch innocent civilians being slaughtered? Or are we going to do something to actually stop Putin and stop him soon?
When a hospital gets bombed in Gaza City, it's self-defense. It was inevitable. What can we do? The inevitable repercussion of the Palestinians' own guilt. When Israel switches off the water supply, not even the electricity supply, the water supply, the press present this as the inevitable solidarity of the West to Israel.
There are 2.3 million people squeezed into a 32-mile stretch of land without power, without water, without food. You cannot deprive the Israelis and Netanyahu of the urge for revenge. They are going to take awful revenge. You cannot blame the Israelis. And I'll tell you what they're going to do to Gaza. They're going to turn it into a car park.
For centuries, we've known that the powerful like to discriminate between fashionable victims and unfashionable victims. The victims of our friends and the victims of our enemies. But never before have we had a global media campaign for violating the very basic principles of truth-telling and genuine reporting of facts on the ground. The West talks about total victory of Israel and total victory of Ukraine. There can be no total victory in either battlefield. A sane humanity would pause and think about the rationality of never-ending wars. All these hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, euros, and British pounds that are being spent on bombs, shells, rockets, drones, bullets, grenades that are killing children as we speak, both in Gaza but also in Ukraine, is testimony to the gross irrationality of our species, and in particular of the system of government that we have, which allows these decisions to be taken without any consultation of the people. Because I have no doubt that if the British people, if the German people, if the Russian people, if the American people were consulted, there is no chance in hell that they would condone this kind of expenditure. And we should realize that never-ending wars are the objective of arms dealers and of politicians like Netanyahu, like Putin, who do not want the war to end for one simple reason, because they will cease to be leaders of these corrupt regimes. Moody's recently downgraded Israel's credit rating. It's not going to make a difference today or tomorrow. But I remember the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. Those of us who were calling for a boycott, a series of sanctions and divestment, we were being met with derision. And I remember Barclays, Ford, and the whole of the financial sector in the City of London doing its utmost to ensure that the creditworthiness of South African-wide capital would not be jeopardized. The first signs that apartheid in South Africa was under pressure was when the credit rating of South Africa started being diminished. It was the first chink in the armor of apartheid. I truly hope that Moody's downgrading of the Israeli apartheid state and its economy is going to be a similar harbinger of the demise of the last apartheid state to be standing. In this day and age, it is of the utmost importance to support independent media who are covering the stories that the mainstream media either will never cover or they will.
Bruised and used and dripping in the tragedy, castrated with fuel and pain constantly used. Flows of sludge under the street, electric fuse. New Jack City. New Jack City. New Jack City. Be in high fashion gold. In New Jack City.
Yeah, that's right. New Jack City.
Circumstantial change.
New Jack City.
You know the journey, have faith. The universe won't put you at a place.
That's right.
New Jack City. Soul, some say, is gone. Those are the ones who lack a soul. The ones who don't know. There's a whole world beyond these gates. Another world, one which, in it, play. The ones with souls no plan and fly make a way. Soul knows mother. Soul wants to connect and be with her. Soul should be in all creatures, organic or not. Yet the elite seek to rip the souls from even the smallest and purest of bodies. They feed themselves and give scraps to the rich, and the ones born with no souls don't know just what exactly exists. They're too busy to square, just not really even there to understand all that truly is at stake. They give and take of essence, rich foils of plunder and escape reality's few. Prices rise a time or two in the land where Jack once roamed. One didn't have such a dark fate. The heart of the city is where not just leaves but shadows fall. It's also where struggles and battles hold us all. This is about rising up against all odds and mountains around against all despair. This city is a tale of hope's flame ignited in the air.
That's right.
New Jack City is what they call this domain.
Now.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Health officials in Gaza say at least 16 children have died in recent days from starvation and dehydration as Israel's assault on Gaza continues. UNICEF is warning the number of child deaths will likely, quote, rapidly increase unless the war ends. Pediatricians in Gaza say they have nothing to give malnourished children.
Yes, malnutrition plays a major role in the number of children that come to us, and thus in the number of deaths there are. When a child is supposed to eat 3 meals a day and ends up eating 1 meal, that's not enough for him. Your body becomes deficient in carbohydrates, vitamins, proteins, and deficient in fats that are necessary for the body. Then the body goes into a severe dehydration state. I can honestly say that we can't even deal properly with 50-60% of the cases we receive because we have nothing to give them. The most we can do for them is either give them saline solution or sugar solution.
On Sunday, Vice President Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in Gaza. She made the comments in a speech in Selma, Alabama, marking the 59th anniversary of Bloody Sunday.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
The U.S. Vice President's remarks came 3 days after the United States blocked a UN Security Council statement condemning Israel after Israeli soldiers opened fire on Palestinians seeking aid in Gaza City in a massacre that left 112 people dead and over 700 injured. On Sunday, officials in Gaza accused Israeli forces of killing and wounding dozens more aid seekers who gathered at the Kuwaiti roundabout in Gaza City. Facing growing international criticism, President Biden on Friday announced the U.S. would begin airdropping food into Gaza. While reading from an index card, Biden twice mistakenly referred to Ukraine instead of Gaza.
In the coming days, we're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies into Ukraine and seek to continue to open up other avenues into Ukraine, including the possibility of a Marine corridor to deliver large amounts of humanitarian assistance.
On Saturday, the U.S. Air Force and Royal Jordanian Air Force dropped 38,000 ready-to-eat meals into Gaza, enough for one meal for about 1.6% of Gaza's population. Humanitarian groups say far more aid is needed in Gaza, where a quarter of the population is on the verge of famine. Major protests against Israel's assault on Gaza were held Saturday in a worldwide day of action. In San Francisco, police fired pepper spray and hit protesters with batons as a march passed the Israeli consulate. Thousands also marched in New York, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Albuquerque, Charlotte, and other cities. Protesters in Washington, D.C. included the longtime peace activist Kathy Boylan with the Dorothy Day Catholic worker. She called on Biden to stop arming Israel.
We're dropping some food, and we're dropping the bombs and the tanks and the bullets and everything else at the same time. That's what he's got to do. Stop sending the money and the weapons.
Negotiations for a temporary ceasefire faced another setback Sunday when Israel boycotted talks in Cairo after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hamas of not agreeing to provide a list of all living Israeli hostages. On Saturday, thousands of Israelis marched in Tel Aviv against Netanyahu.
Israel is being controlled by a coalition of semi-dictatorial, fascist people who don't have the good of the people in their hearts. We're being misled and led into this endless war that doesn't have an end in sight. Our government doesn't care about the more than 100 hostages that are held in Gaza right now. Our government doesn't care about the people of Israel. They only care about their own interests. They're all criminals. They're crooks. They need to go out.
On Sunday, Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz arrived in the United States in what's being described as an unauthorized trip. Gantz, who is seen as a rival to Netanyahu, is scheduled to hold talks with Vice President Kamala Harris and other top officials. Netanyahu has reportedly lashed out at Gantz for making the trip without his approval. The Israeli embassy in Washington has been instructed not to facilitate Gantz's trip. In more news from the region, Israel repeatedly attacked southern Lebanon Saturday, killing at least 7 members of Hezbollah. There are reports the dead included a grandson of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Meanwhile, in the Red Sea, a UK-owned cargo ship, the Ruby Mar, sank on Saturday, days after it was attacked by Houthi forces from Yemen. Greenpeace has warned the sinking could result in a major environmental crisis since the ship was carrying 21,000 metric tons of fertilizer and a large amount of fuel. The Ruby Mar is the first ship to sink in the Red Sea since the Houthis began attacking ships to protest Israel's assault on Gaza. Nikki Haley beat Donald Trump in the Republican primary in Washington, D.C. Sunday. Haley won about 63% of the vote, making her the first woman ever to win a Republican primary. But her victory came just a day after Trump easily won Republican caucuses in Michigan, Missouri, and Idaho, giving him a commanding lead in the race ahead of Super Tuesday tomorrow. 15 states will hold primaries and caucuses. In Ukraine, at least 12 people have died after a Russian drone struck a 9-story apartment building in the city of Odessa Saturday. The dead reportedly included at least 5 children, the youngest being 4 months old. Other news on Ukraine, the German military has launched an internal probe after a Russian news outlet obtained tape of a private meeting where German officials discussed providing Ukraine with long-range missiles that could be used to destroy the Kerch Bridge, which links Russia to occupied Crimea. During the leaked call, one German general is heard saying, quote, "There is no real reason to say we can't do this. It only depends on the political red lines," he said. In Russia, crowds are continuing to lay flowers at the grave of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, buried Friday after thousands attended his funeral in Moscow. Navalny died 2 weeks ago at an Arctic prison. According to one count, 45 people were arrested across Russia for publicly paying respects to Navalny. We'll have more on Russia later in the program. The United Nations Human Rights Chief has called on the warring sides in Sudan to give safe access to humanitarian agencies as the crisis worsens. Volker Turk spoke Friday.
Sudan has become a living nightmare. Almost half of the population, 25 million people, are in urgent need of food and medical aid. Some 80% of hospitals have been put out of service. The apparently deliberate denial of safe and unimpeded access for humanitarian agencies within Sudan itself constitutes a serious violation of international law and may amount to war crime.
Volker Turk speaking in Geneva on Friday. Lawmakers in Pakistan have elected Shehbaz Sharif to serve as Pakistan's new prime minister for a second time, despite protests by supporters of Imran Khan, the imprisoned former leader of Pakistan ousted in 2022. Allies of Khan won the most seats in February's election, but fell short of a majority, allowing Sharif to form a coalition government. Khan supporters say the election in February was rigged to prevent them from winning more seats. This is Artaj Gul, who served in Khan's government.
Shehbaz Sharif cannot deliver to this country because he is not elected by the people of Pakistan. He has stolen the credit of the people of PTI people, and he has stolen the vote of Pakistani people. He cannot deliver. He's been imposed on the public of Pakistan.
Haiti has declared a 72-hour state of emergency after armed groups stormed 2 of the country's largest prisons, freeing as many as 4,000 prisoners. The jailbreak came as Haiti's unelected and deeply unpopular Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, was visiting Kenya to sign an agreement that would allow the deployment of 1,000 Kenyan police officers to Haiti as part of a U.S.-backed security plan. One of the most powerful gang leaders in Haiti, Jimmy Charizier, who is known as Barbecue, has openly threatened to topple Henri, who's ruled Haiti with the backing of the U.S. since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. Charizier spoke on Friday.
We ask the Haitian National Police and the military to take responsibility and arrest Ariel Henry. Once again, the population is not our enemy. The armed groups are not your enemy. You arrest Ariel Henry for the country's liberation. These weapons that we have are not here to hurt our brothers who come from the same milieu as us. The poor take the streets and they trust us. These weapons are our symbol of freedom. With these weapons, we will liberate the country, and these weapons will change the country.
The largest wildfire in Texas history continues to grow and has spread into Oklahoma. As of Sunday, the Smokehouse Creek fire was only 15% contained, and it burned a size of land larger than the state of Rhode Island. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said on Sunday the blaze, which occurred amidst record heat, is a sign that the nation must be better prepared for extreme weather caused by climate change. In health news, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has dropped its guidance that individuals who test positive for COVID-19 should isolate for 5 days. Under the new guidelines, the CDC urges people to stay home until symptoms improve and they have been fever-free for 24 hours. The new guidelines are similar to CDC recommendations for flu and other respiratory viruses. Federal authorities are investigating the death of Nex Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary high school sophomore who died in February, a day after they were assaulted by 3 girls in a high school bathroom. The U.S. Education Department said Friday it's opened a probe into whether the Owasso Public Schools District, quote, failed to appropriately respond to alleged harassment, unquote, faced by Nex. Family members said Nex has faced bullying since last year. Their cause of death has yet to be determined. And a judge in Colorado has sentenced a paramedic to 5 years in prison for his role in the 2019 death of Elijah McClain, the 23-year-old black young man who was walking home from the store when he was tackled by police, placed in a Carrot hold, and later injected with ketamine, a powerful sedative. The sentencing of Peter Sichuniak comes after he and another paramedic were found guilty in December of criminally negligent homicide for McClain's death. During the trial, an expert witness testified there was no reason for the paramedics to give McClain ketamine. They were also found to have failed to provide medical care to McClain after they drugged him and he lay handcuffed and unconscious on the ground. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.